Three men own more wealth than half the country. The middle class is vanishing. And somehow, we're still arguing about avocado toast. If every dollar weighed 1 pound, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg's combined wealth would weigh 480,000 tons, while the bottom half of Americans would barely reach 61,000 tons. That's nearly 8 to 1 from just 3 men versus 165 million people. In this video, we'll explore why the disappearance of the middle class signals something far more dangerous than just rising prices. This isn't about vilifying success. It's about understanding a pattern that history has shown us before. In 1971, nearly 61% of Americans lived in middle-class households. Today, that number is just over 51%. In 50 years, the middle class shrank by 1/10 of the population. The median household income today is around $80,000 a year. To be middle class, you need between roughly $53,000 and $160,000, depending on where you live. But nearly half the country can't actually afford the basics of middle-class life anymore. Since 2000, rents have more than doubled. The median home price has soared to over $435,000. Childcare averages $1,200 to $1,500 per month. College costs $25,000 to $35,000 per year at public universities. And wages? Adjusted for inflation, real weekly wages are lower today than they were 50 years ago. You're not broke. The system has fundamentally changed around you. The top 1% now owns nearly 30% of all wealth in America. The bottom 50% owns 2.5%. Elon Musk is worth over $400 billion. Jeff Bezos over $200 billion. Mark Zuckerberg over $250 billion. Larry Ellison over $300 billion. 4 people control more than $1 trillion. More than the entire GDP of Brazil, India, or France, Germany, and Canada combined. This isn't about whether these individuals worked hard. It's about the pattern. As economists like Thomas Piketty have documented, when wealth concentrates to this degree, it reshapes the entire economic and political landscape. And history shows us that pattern creates instability. Meet Maria. She's a single mom in Ohio, working 2 jobs, daycare by day, cleaning offices at night. She earns $42,000 a year. Her rent takes half her income. Childcare costs $1,200 a month, more than her car payment and groceries combined. She has health insurance, but her deductible is $6,000. She avoids doctors. She hasn't taken a vacation in 7 years. Maria isn't failing. She's working exactly as hard as previous generations did. The difference is the system has shifted beneath her feet. 37 million Americans live in poverty. Nearly 800,000 Americans are homeless. Over 20 million households pay more than 50% of their income just for housing. Medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy. These aren't moral failures. These are the predictable outcomes of structural changes in how our economy distributes gains. This happened through policy choices made over decades, choices that seemed reasonable at the time but had compounding effects. Union membership collapsed from 35% of the workforce in the 1950s to around 10% today. Without collective bargaining, individual workers compete against each other rather than negotiating collectively. Corporate consolidation accelerated. Monsanto was acquired by Bayer in 2018 for $63 billion, creating one of the largest agrochemical companies in the world. Similar consolidations happened across healthcare, telecommunications, banking, reducing competition. Tax policy shifted. Capital gains became taxed at lower rates than wages. In 2007 and 2011, Jeff Bezos paid zero federal income tax using legal deductions. Warren Buffett openly admitted his secretary paid a higher tax rate than he did because his income comes from investments, taxed at lower rates than wages. The point isn't that anyone is behaving immorally. The point is that the rules themselves create different realities for different economic classes. But these policy choices didn't happen in a vacuum. They were shaped by people with significant resources and clear interests. In the 2024 election cycle, billionaires spent nearly $2 billion trying to shape elections. Since Citizens United in 2010, dark money surged from less than $5 million in 2006 to more than $1 billion in 2024 alone. More than $1 billion in anonymous spending. We don't even know who funded it. Elon Musk spent $288 million on the 2024 election. That single investment gave him access and influence over policy decisions affecting his billions in government contracts. Michael Bloomberg spent over $1 billion on a presidential campaign. Charles Koch and his family funded think tanks for decades, shaping policy around deregulation and tax cuts. George Soros funds political organizations aligned with his preferences. This isn't about vilifying individuals, but the structural reality is that wealth buys disproportionate influence, and that creates a system responding more to the wealthy than to the majority. We're told that hard work is the path to success, and effort matters. But hard work alone is no longer sufficient when the rules have fundamentally shifted. Most people in poverty are working, often multiple jobs. They're doing everything they were told would lead to stability. Teachers work 50-hour weeks and struggle with housing costs. Janitors clean billion-dollar offices but can't afford rent nearby. Meanwhile, some of the wealthiest individuals have paid zero federal income tax in certain years using legal strategies. Here's the reality. Wealth generates more wealth. Capital gains, stock ownership, and real estate appreciate faster than wages, creating a gap that hard work alone can't close. Social mobility is declining. Children born into poverty are far less likely to rise economically than those born into wealth, even with equal effort. History offers us patterns to recognize, not to predict exact outcomes, but to understand structural risks. In ancient Rome, land ownership concentrated over time. The middle class of small farmers disappeared. Tiberius Gracchus attempted land redistribution to address inequality. Senators killed him for it. The Republic eventually collapsed into authoritarian rule, not because Romans were immoral, but because the economic structure became unsustainable. In pre-revolutionary France, the tax burden fell on the middle and lower classes while nobility paid almost nothing. Economic resentment built over decades. When the system finally broke in 1789, it broke violently. In 1793, King Louis XVI was executed for treason. This wasn't inevitable. It resulted from a system that wouldn't reform itself. In Weimar Germany after World War I, hyperinflation in the early 1920s wiped out middle-class savings overnight. Then the Great Depression hit. The Nazi Party promised order and recovery, then World War II and genocide. In America's first Gilded Age from 1870 to 1900, Mark Twain coined the term to describe something golden on the surface but rotten underneath. Industrial titans like Rockefeller and Carnegie built unprecedented empires while workers lived in tenements with virtually no security. Wealth bought political influence directly. That era ended through reform, not because elites became generous, but because the instability became untenable. Many economists argue we're living through a second Gilded Age. The signs are familiar: a shrinking middle class, concentrated wealth, and political systems that no longer reflect the needs of the majority. Not because anyone is evil, but because the structure itself becomes unsustainable. A healthy middle class isn't a luxury. It's the stabilizer, the economic shock absorber that keeps societies from tearing apart. When most people can afford homes, education, and security, they have stake in the system's survival. They drive consumer spending that employs others. They believe effort leads to progress. They resist extremism because they have something to lose. History has shown us what happens when the middle class erodes, wealth concentrates, and reform is resisted. We're not there yet, but we're drifting toward it. Like a ship caught in a slow current, moving toward waters history has warned us about. Not because anyone is steering us there deliberately, but because no one's at the wheel. History doesn't predict the future, but it does send warnings. The question is whether anyone's listening.